each other. Never put us next to each other. Yep.
Andy, Adam.
Right?
The best is when it's
Adam,
Andy, Adam,
Andrew.
Andrea. Like one of those tongue twisters. We're ready? Okay. I'd like to welcome everyone out to the Thursday, December 16th regularly planned commission meeting. We'll start off with item 2.1, which is the Pledge of Allegiance that will be offered by our very own Wendy.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Wendy. Item 2.2 is roll call. We do have a full quorum. Andrea is attending virtually, and we probably should make sure she's on. Andrea, are you there?
I'm here.
All right, thank you so much.
Thanks.
And then item 2.3, are there any conflicts of interest with any of the items today?
No.
Thank you. Seeing none, we'll move on to item 2.4, which is an approval of minutes for the October 7th, 2021 and November 4th, 2021 Planning Commission meetings. We'll look for a motion from someone on the Planning Commission.
I'll make a motion to approve item 2.4, approval of minutes for the October 7th and November 4th, 2021 Planning Commission meetings.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Heather. Second by Adam. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Andrea. I heard you too. Then we do have one item. I think there was going to be a change in the agenda.
Correct. I would like to make a motion that we amend the agenda so that we discuss item 3.4, the Camden Commons Site Plan, before item 3.3, the Camden Commons Preliminary Subdivision.
And
Second that.
motion by Andy, second by Adam. All in favor?
Aye.
So we will adjust that slight adjustment in the agenda. And then we'll start off with item 3.1, which is a request of an extension of time for preliminary approval of the KA Acres subdivision. And we'll look for city staff for additional information.
All right, good evening. As you said, the first item on the agenda today is extension of time for the KA subdivision. It's located at about 13,800 south and 6,200 west. Here's the property location here. To the southwest is southeast is the elementary school. Give you a general idea where that's at. It's 1.29 acres. It's zoned ag 0.25. I guess, let's see, the subdivision that was approved back in December of 2019 was for a flag lot for two-lot subdivision for these two parcels here. Part of that condition of approval was that the property had to meet all ordinances, et cetera, at the time before the plat could be recorded. The applicant did submit a Mylar back in November. At that time, we went and did an inspection of the site and found that the site was not in compliance with city nuisance ordinances. At that point, we reached out to the applicant and had a discussion with the applicant, regarding those requirements. The initial conversation, he said he could get it cleaned up, within the month time he had remaining. We followed up again with him in a couple weeks. The site still wasn't up to standards. I had another discussion with the applicant and just encouraged him, to maybe apply for an extension, if his intent was to clean the property to get the subdivision approved. At that time, he asked for a 6-month extension. That's something staff did consider. Considering the amount of work on the property, staff recommended that we maybe extend that to 1 year, but still put a condition in if he's not in compliance with 6 months, that we would issue an also violation on that property. So here's some existing conditions of the property, I guess, just showing some of the nuisance violations on said property. Again, staff does recommend approval. It does give some incentive for the property owner to clean the property. If you have any questions for me, I'll be more than happy to answer them. The applicant unfortunately could not make it today, but his son is here to answer any additional questions that you may have.
Any questions for staff? All right, thank you. If the, I guess the applicant's son is here and he has any additional information he'd like to share. Do you want to come up to the mic and just state your name? Just, it's recorded. Thank you.
Chandler Van Buge, and we have a plan. He's working out of state right now. We're working on it as much as we can, but we're all working full-time jobs, so we're trying to get it done, but it's taking longer than we thought it would.
Okay, any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, I'll let you have a seat.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll look at Planning Commission for additional comments or discussion or a motion to be made.
I'm ready for a motion. So.
Anything else? Okay, go ahead, Adam.
I'd like to make a motion to approve item 3.1 for an extension of time for the preliminary approval of acre subdivision.
I'll second.
Thank you. Motion made by Adam, a second by Forrest, and we'll call for a vote. Andy?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Forrest?
Yes.
Daryl?
Yes.
And Andrea?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. We'll move on to item 3.2, which is a request for approval of a conditional use permit application for a personal care service, a spa.
So this request is coming from Soleil Lofts Holding LLC. It's an apartment complex located kind of in the southeast part of Harriman. I don't really know what road that is, but it's right there. The zoning for it is R215, which is medium density residential. And a little bit of, I guess, backstory behind it is they came to city council to request a text change, which would allow personal care service in this zone, and it was approved by city council. So they want to use this personal care service conditional use to open up a spa to the general public. So basically the way the spa is now, from what I understand, it's like an amenity for people who live in the apartment complex, but they want to open it up to everyone. So some of the requirements that were set whenever this text change was approved a few months ago, it had to be limited to a residential development of 15 acres. It had to be attached to a clubhouse or some big structure that was shared by everybody in the apartment complex. It had to be limited to the hours of 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. for its operation, and then it also had to have sufficient parking. So they meet all these requirements for their spa that's part of the Soleil Holding apartment. So as of right now, they have 1,500 square feet of space, which requires, I think it's like 6.3 parking stalls, and they have 7 stalls. Right now, they have 4 with signage, and they say that they're waiting on 3 more signs to be made for their spots, but that picture you can see it highlights the spots that they do have saved for. It would be just for people using the spa. So just kind of going over those requirements again, it is attached to the big clubhouse. It's its own separate, it's part of the building, but it has separate access. It meets the acreage requirement, and it's open from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., which also falls within the allowed time frame. So planning staff is recommending the approval of the conditional use for personal care services for Soleil Spa. They will agree with the recommendations from other agencies. It doesn't approve any signs with it, and then they also have to install, we recommend that they have to install the remaining 3 signs for the spa.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Thank you so much. If the applicant's here, if they want to come up and just share additional information.
Hi, my name is Gracia Mangrum, and I'm the community manager at Soleil Lofts Apartments. Part of what attracts the residents of Harriman to Soleil Lofts is the sustainability features and access to amenities. Included in the current amenity package is the spa and tanning salon where residents can receive beauty services. I would like to ask for approval of the conditional use application, which would allow the spa at Soleil Lofts to be open to the public and not exclusively for the use of Soleil residents. We have seen so much growth in the area, and I feel that it would be beneficial to the surrounding citizens to have a place closer to home where they can receive beauty services. By allowing access to the public, the current spa would see higher return, which would allow the spa to provide a diverse number of services to the public and residents of Soleil Lofts. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. I only have one question. So there's 7 stalls that are for, I guess, potential customers. How much staff do you have?
At Soleil Lofts, we are a staff of 14.
Okay. And obviously they have different parking area.
Yes, they park past one of the buildings that has a lot of open parking. That's first come, first serve.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Ready for a motion?
Motion or thoughts or anything? Yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve item 3.2.
I'll second it.
Motion made by Heather, a second by Adam. We'll call for a vote.
Sorry, can I make a
Oh,
correction?
yes.
Sorry, I'll make an approval for item 3.2 with staff's 3 recommendations.
Okay.
And I'll still second that.
All right. Motion by Heather, a second by Adam. We'll call for a vote. Andrea?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Forrest?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
And Daryl?
Yes. Switching it up.
Thank you so much.
Wow, you didn't go in a line. I'm impressed.
All right, then, we will now at this time, instead of item 3.3, we'll do 3.4, and then go back to item 3.3 afterwards. Okay. 3.3 is on for a public hearing, so just to make note.
Correct. Yeah, and just so everyone understands, including the members of the public who may be following this item, the applicant has prepared a presentation tonight, and so in order to avoid some duplicate information, I will defer to their presentation. Following the presentation on the site plan, we've asked the Planning Commission to consider making a motion to suspend and then recommence your decision, your deliberation on the site plan request following your potential motion on the subdivision. So we'll have a presentation by the applicant. Then if the commission is willing, suspend the discussion of the site plan. Then we'll go into a subdivision presentation, public hearing, and then a potential motion on the subdivision, and then followed by recommencing your discussion on the site plan. So having said that, I just want to make a statement that in our staff report, we have made a recommendation for approval outlining several conditions. One of the recommendations, I've tried to identify if there are any modifications or further changes to the project as presented to you tonight. That would require an amendment process and a reappearance before the Planning Commission. I know that one of the big concerns that we've had as a community is we see a project, we have a vision, an image of what we anticipate, and then through either market forces or just, there's just pressures to maybe re-engineer the project. Sometimes we end up with something different. And so I hope I've created language in the recommendation that would signal to all parties involved that changes to the project would require, if you were to recommend approval, it would require reappearance for the Planning Commission before moving forward on permitting the project. So with that said, do you have any questions for staff at this point in time before you hear a presentation from the applicant? Okay. And I believe that's been preloaded with you? Okay.
Hello, my name is Jason Dunham. I'm with Goodborough and Bradford Houston Design Studio. And so we're happy to be here to talk about this project with all of you. And we wanted to kind of walk through a little bit of the background and the thinking behind the project just to help set the stage for what the proposal is. How do you advance?
Oh, do you have that remote?
Just the arrow?
Yeah, back or forward.
Okay, it was trying to go backwards. I'm sorry. We wanted to present this project with some of the initial inspiration and starting with the context and how we think about projects as we approach them and design them. This is the project boundaries, as you all know, that is showing some of the surrounding context of multifamily and institutional uses and future commercial uses. We always draw circles around our project, and those represent a quarter-mile radius, which is a 5-minute walk. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but those are some of the parameters that we use to define neighborhoods and towns. So what people are willing to walk is kind of how we limit the size of neighborhoods as a comfortable walk of 5 minutes. And you can see how these rings with a quarter-mile radius and then a half-mile radius start to explain how what the proximities are to this property and what other opportunities exist and places for people to walk to. A half a mile is typically represented for people who are willing to walk a little bit further, potentially for either exercise or for public transit or for special commercial uses. And then a mile radius shows you how close it is to some of the other town centers of Daybreak and some of the extremities in and around Harriman and the west side of Daybreak. Some of the design considerations that we had before us were obviously we're surrounded and embedded in the middle of other development, existing development, which is higher density uses. And so for us, because of this location and the property size, medium density residential was something that seemed to be perfect for this lot or for this property. And we always refer to medium density residential as kind of a missing middle housing. A lot of times you have the two extremes of single family detached and then, 3-4 story apartment buildings or condos. And so there's a whole plethora of different residential building types in between that we study and emulate a lot in our work. And so we think that those middle density residential units are perfect for this site. A little bit, just some of the basic data of the site and the acreage and the density that we are working within, which is between 7 and 8 dwelling units per acre. And some of the other site constraints listed there are, existing conditions of a gas easement that we had to work around. So that was one of the constraints, is on a small 4-acre site, that was a fixed object that we had to work around, but we think we came up with a great solution for that. It's also embedded, as I mentioned before, which means it has no direct street frontage. And so we really have to create a village and some sort of a place or work a little bit of urban design into this parcel to make it interesting. So the access, we have one primary access on the north and a secondary access on the south corner that works through one of the dentist properties with an easement. And of course, we're working with a small parcel to begin with. I want to talk just a little bit briefly about the design team. We think that our team is unique. Goodborough Development and Homes is a small-scale developer who specializes in more boutique style of developments and product that are based upon principles of new urbanism or traditional town planning. And really it comes down to, like to use the word placemaking. It's unique to find developers who have such a primary focus on creating places that are beautiful and tend to be more sustainable and valuable in the long run. And so we really like to work at all different scales of the market, from attainable housing, up to market rate and even higher end semi-custom residential projects. A partnership exists with Bradford, our Houston design studio. And if you're not familiar with our work, it's steeped in classical architecture and traditional town planning. And so there's a certain method that we use in all of our work, which is based upon classical principles that are timeless and time-tested over centuries and even thousands of years, that we use as a foundation to build upon to create modern architecture and communities that are long-lasting and proven. Just a few examples of our work. Obviously, pretty pictures are one thing, but this is a wonderful watercolor of some law offices and the built result, and a custom single-family residence, a beautiful watercolor, but also a wonderful execution of that project, which is obviously more on the high end of custom residential work, but it really does inform everything that we do. You know, working through those details and with that amount of design and effort really goes into everything that we do, all the way down to market rate housing and communities, and even attainable housing, which deserves those same design principles. And I'm just going to flip through these kind of quickly, but these are just other examples of work, both exterior and interior detailing in some of the houses here in the valley. This project we were really excited about. We decided all of our projects we approach uniquely, where we don't use product that we already have to fit into an existing site that we're interested in. We really begin by finding inspiration that is appropriate for a unique site and working from that direction, and even producing a lot of unique product and solutions that work for that site. So some of our inspiration for this project go back to some historic, wonderful architecture in outside of London. You know, we look at precedents all over the world, not just here locally, but some of those solutions that we find in places that we love, like these examples, which are English arts and crafts homes that are paired or put together into rows of townhouses, and the way that they engage the street and enclose private gardens and create beautiful communities. These are some of the inspirational images that we use as we approach this project. We found some real built buildings that we are familiar with in England that are also, you know, familiar here in the United States. But these are some that really inspired us specifically for this project. And then there's also other contemporary examples of similar English arts and crafts developments in the United States, ones that we've worked in and associated with over the years. And this is one called Hampstead in Montgomery, Alabama. The site, just a little bit about the site plan. Some of the principles that we always promote and feature on our projects are a diversity of housing types, but with a cohesive architecture that ties it all together. That variety is really important in creating interest instead of having, you know, models that are too repetitive. We also mix the housing types, you know, different sizes and different configurations of townhouses in pairs or in triples or even in twin homes and single-family detached homes. There's ways that you can assemble those that create great streets and great public spaces. So we have some features in our project where we made that a key feature, including some of the elements of the architecture like front porches, terraces, and courts that help bring people outdoors and engage with the community. So we have 33 total dwelling units in this project, basically 4 building types that have 6 different unit types within those building types. This is our site plan that starts to lay out the building. So we created just a simple grid of streets that are orthogonal, that really form kind of a loop drive, you know, from the North Camden Street, which is the entry road, has kind of a loop circulation, and then it's broken up by alleys and motor courts that allow the garages to stay at the back of the units and keep, you know, the messiness of garages and driveways and curb cuts and cars parked out front keeps it in the back off of alleys. So all of these are either alley loaded or they are garages towards the back of the lot off of motor courts. And in most cases, they're shared motor courts, as you can see on the two ends. Does this have a pointer also?
You can use the screen, can't you?
Just touch the screen.
Touch the screen.
Just touch the screen?
Yeah.
I gotta turn that on.
When she turns it on.
But on the
Pointed
two,
at the screen, we wouldn't be able to see it because it absorbs into the TVs.
okay. So just like, yeah, here and here. How do I get rid of that?
We can't see.
The X, okay. But anyway, these two ends here, you know, obviously with our site
Can't see
constraints.
that?
Are you able to see that?
We should be able to.
Okay.
The intent is that we're supposed to be able to see what you're drawing.
Okay. On these two ends here, is that visible?
East and west.
You guys can all see it?
You can
Okay.
just jump up and down.
The east
tell us
and
what-
west.
Yeah, the east and west, but those are very narrow swaths of land that are very difficult to get lots on. And to allow us to get the density that we were looking for, we created some wide and shallow units with motor courts in between that allow, you know, these motor courts are in between the units.
Nice.
Now we can
We
see.
can see it now.
You can see that now?
Yep.
Okay. And that allows to minimize curb cuts and driveways and keep the garages in the back and allow us to utilize those narrow pieces of land to get several units in there, but still give a wonderful street frontage and address the public green as well. This is just a color-coded version of that, which is really just identifying the different building types that we have. So they consist of, in the darker pink, a triple townhome, which are really just the same unit, but the middle one has a courtyard. So it's a courtyard unit that has some light and air and ventilation coming into the interior to allow bedrooms and some private outdoor space. The double townhome is the lighter pink, and that has mostly frontage, but it does have side yards that allow some living spaces and the kitchen to open out to the sides. So not only do you have a street presence and a front door on the street and spaces out front, but you do have some private, securable and defensible space that the residents can enjoy. And then in the darker yellow are the twin homes, which are larger homes that are attached, but they look like, you know, one single larger home. So this is all broken down to really feel more residential in scale, even though they are mostly attached townhomes and twin homes. And then there's a few single-family homes in the lighter yellow or cream, kind of in the corners and on the north end. The building elevations, we always like to draw in streetscapes because that's how you experience these buildings instead of in isolation. But these are some black and white drawings. The top one is standing in the green, in Camden green, looking north. So you can see the triple townhouse in the middle and the two double townhouses flanking. And then the bottom row of houses are on that eastern street that show the two twin houses that are a little bit bigger with the double gable. Looks like just a larger residence, but it's really two residences with separate entryways and porches, and then some detached single-family homes flanking that on the two ends. A little bit of color brings it to life. One thing that you'll notice as we proceed through this is that the landscape is really integral to this project, and in English arts and crafts communities that we've studied, the outdoor, you know, lawns and hedges that help define those spaces, and the integration of landscape with the architecture is really paramount in this project. And these are just some close-ups of those building types with the double townhouse with two separate entries but with a common entry court, the triple townhouse, which has a courtyard in the middle, so that space in the middle is one courtyard townhouse attached, and then these are two separate townhouses on the sides. And then the twin home is the other primary building type that has, really, it's split down the middle here is where that twin home is divided, at the chimney and the fireplace, and then you have these individual entries that are really a side porch. I don't know if you've been to Charleston, but it's a side porch that runs along the living room and towards the kitchen. And so it's a covered outdoor space outside the living room that opens out to this hedged-in yard out on the front. So that gives you a little bit of defined outdoor space, but still allows you to be out front and to engage with neighbors.
You go back to the one that has the shared entrance and describe that to me.
This one here?
No, one more. That one. Oh, sorry, one more than that. My bad.
Okay. This one
That
here.
one. You said it has a shared entrance?
Right, so you enter through this courtyard in the middle here, and you have a front door there, and then the other one is on the side of the elevation there.
Oh, okay, that was my
So
question.
you
Thank
come in, one is straight ahead and one is to the right.
Cool, perfect, thank you. I just wanted to make sure they weren't using the same entrance door. Is
Right.
the reason I was asking.
Yeah. Oops, I think I'm going the wrong way. And we are also showing 4 sides of these primary building types, so you can see what the sides look like. On that double townhouse, you can see the side here, where these side courts open up. That's living room and dining room that can open up out to a terrace, you know, with fencing and walls that help give it privacy with its neighbor. And then the rear elevation is on the bottom right, off of the alley. So you even still have individuality, even with your garages and the gables off of the back. The triple townhouse, working all the way around. Again, there is some repetition in some of the unit types, so you'll see that same side elevation as the double townhouse. And the only difference is the rear elevation on the alley has that middle unit, a little bit wider, but it has its own garage and windows above. The twin home, you can see as on the right-hand side, that is, it's looking this direction on that right side unit, but you can see that there's an arched loggia with French doors that open out from the living room, and then you have your own private outdoor space, which is a lawn and some landscaping and different treatments of landscape with a little bit of hedges that just help define that space. And then over here is where the shared motor court is with your neighbor. And then, of course, the back of that one is a little bit longer, but you can see that, we still give some effort to the composition of those elevations. There will be some outdoor spaces out there, and some of them accessible as well. Our color and material palette, as shown in some of our inspiration images, it's very simple. We believe in keeping the palette simple and focusing on details and form and massing and proportions and getting a few key things right. So we don't want to put everything on the front facade and then turn the corner with a change of materials that just looks like it's a stage set. So to us, it's all about simple forms that are based on tradition and history, and then focusing in on very simple key elements like the chimney or the bay window or the beautiful arched opening in that porch that leads to the front door. The materials will be primarily muted earth tones of off-white and sage and tan colors. And so there'll be kind of different ways of putting those colors together to bring just a little bit of life to any woodwork and trim and the bay window and things like that. But they're primarily stucco buildings that will have, we explain a little bit in that right up there on the method, but it's a 2-coat system that has more of a smooth finish. And so that will allow us to really create a wonderful, massing of these buildings that have a continuous smooth surface that really lets the contrast shine, with windows and with shadow lines and with some of the materials of the gables and the roof and the window sashes. The fences that we're planning to use will primarily be out of sight, We're proposing wood fences that would potentially be demising, privacy walls behind stucco wing walls that are on the street. So back on the alleys, they will just fill in gaps between buildings, and then in between side courtyards that just give privacy between neighbors. So the intent is for not wood fences to be part of the architecture, it's really to just create privacy behind units.
Can you go to the main picture that shows the whole plan and just show me where those wood fences will be roughly? Yeah, right there.
Yeah, this one actually shows the fences. You can start to see, fences in between here, short fences that are just creating privacy. But if you zoom in closely here, if you have a chance to, on the fronts of all those buildings are stucco wing walls. So those are kind of coming down and creating privacy. And then behind those, where you have side yards, that's where the fences will be. So it's really just these little tiny pieces in between.
And is it only on the middle one, or it's on all of them, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not on the ones on the outside ends that face streets, just the ones that are, back on the alley. So they'll potentially right here, we're still considering if that might just be mostly open.
So the ones you did before that, those are common areas, or they're owned by who?
Those are gonna be, we're studying the possibilities there, but one easy way to handle it is with dividing that space down the middle with a lot line, and then providing easements for the townhouse residents to use. And so it's almost kind of zigzags, So this unit has a side yard that opens up out there. This one opens up there. And so we're still exploring that, but there's multiple ways to achieve that, either with zero lot line or with just putting it down the middle with easements.
But it's definitely not the third unit, inner unit, correct?
No, because that one has its own courtyard, private courtyard.
But the outside ones wouldn't have their own.
These ones here?
Sorry, no, back on this, yeah, I could see the side yard
Oh,
there, but
these
there's
ones
no
here.
side yards on, yeah, right.
Yeah, so those ones have a narrow sliver, so they will have access there, but they just won't have it's too narrow to have a private outdoor space. So, really these are townhouses, and typically they don't have the luxury of having side yards. So what we're doing is just trying to take advantage of the condition of not having 7 units attached and breaking it up. And instead of just having a useless 10 feet in between with 2 5-foot slivers that you can't really use, we're trying to figure out a solution to allow a private side court that you can actually put furniture on and extend your indoor spaces outwards and create privacy. So we're designing all the buildings so we can control where windows are and, making sure that there's privacy with your neighbor.
Can you go back one more? Sorry, it was the colored rendering I was just gonna ask.
The colored site plan
Yep, that one. Oop, right,
or the elevation?
elevation, sorry, I
Street
meant to say
elevation.
elevation.
Okay.
That one. So, where these trees are, right there,
Okay.
is where we're talking?
Yes, correct. So in between these spaces, we have wing walls that come down and touch the other units. And so you'll never see fencing in between. Just kind of a wing wall and an arched opening for access and possibly a gate for privacy.
So before you leave this, so those color palettes you were just showing just before we backtrack, each unit, or not unit, but each building, I guess, will have the same color. You're not going to mix and match colors on the, per townhome,
Yeah,
anything
we
like
will.
that.
I
It'll be
mean,
a
this-
constant.
The stucco,
continuous.
we're thinking that the stucco would be the same color to kind of unify all these, because there's a lot of variety in form and in elevation here. And so we're going to let the windows and wood posts and, eaves and, window sashes and front doors and gates, those would get the paint color. And with those 4 colors that we showed, there would be variety between each unit.
Okay.
So even on the same building, there will be different colors to help identify like the three
But not the
units.
stucco. Stucco will all be the same.
stucco will
Just
all be
the
the
accent
same.
colors could be
Just the
different for
accent
each.
colors, correct.
Okay.
So I have a question. I really enjoy your precedent images and your sketches, but something gets lost in transition between your sketches and your CAD elevations. A lot of the details, which are predominantly brick masonry details, like the swoops, the corbels, the things that really make this a great design, get lost once you go over to stucco. How are you making the transition from a masonry style building, which is what these are, to a stucco building, with the headers, with your sills? How are you showing those kind of elements, which in a masonry building, if it was painted, which most of your precedent is painted, you don't typically see those, but when you get to stucco, you can really lose those details, and it really looks dumbed down. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So my question is, how are you going to make the transition from these masonry openings to basically it's a wood structure?
Yeah, we do that all the time, and it's really, formed stucco, with the wood, substrate. And, we anticipate all those details remaining in. We don't have a whole lot of detail around, like, arched openings. It's really just sills underneath the window, which are required for, water intrusion. And we don't even have, really surrounds around openings or around arches. And so those will just be stucco that just returns and turns the corner and wraps the whole thing.
Right, but usually you have a brick mold, or you have some kind of trim that goes around the intersection of the brick and the window itself.
Yeah, and there will be
That differentiates it from a true or a typical stucco, where the stucco just returns back on the window frame.
Yeah.
And that just
Yeah, and we work out those details. A lot of the historic stucco buildings, I grew up in Florida and in California, the same thing. All of those stucco, Mediterranean, Spanish buildings are all wood frame, stucco on wood frame. So it's a very common historic,
Right, but what you're showing is an English brick style, because
Well, yeah.
that's what it is. It's an
well,
English.
some of it, most of the English arts and crafts is a rendered stucco. Some of it is painted brick, and sometimes you get different materials in there.
Right.
Same thing with Spanish Mediterranean. Sometimes there is brick and even some stone when you
Right.
get into Tuscany. So we don't really see an issue, historically speaking, and in our experience in working in this material with translating, stucco over wood frame. It's a very
Right. I mean, I've done a similar thing, in my designs, but typically going from a brick style of house and details to, wood framed, there needs to be a little bit of careful consideration on how you do that, obviously. Yeah, because, some of your details, like your swoops and stuff, I don't think that they're on the CAD drawings anymore. And you're showing a very heavy shingle, on your sketches, which looks great. I love your sketches. But that really gets lost, when you start moving into just an asphalt shingle.
Yeah,
You lose that character, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a natural thing that happens from freehand wiggly lines to straight
It
CAD lines.
is, unless
Right.
you prepare for it and actually say it's going to be a thicker, profile shingle and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But you're right,
Exactly.
You
So
lose a lot.
We do retain the swoops and the slopes in here and the
Sure.
little details. And, we try to illustrate that with our earlier images
Mm-hmm.
of stucco houses on some of those. And I think we're pretty experienced with pulling off those details.
Sure.
And, especially with experience in the custom residential world, where you really know how to work those details and work with contractors and tradesmen to help educate and coach them through those. I think that's one of our specialties, is helping
Sure.
with that execution. Of
No,
that.
I understand that completely, because that's my background as well. Yeah, I would just like to see, you show some headers over some of the windows, which is great. And then a lot of them, on some of the elevations, are just missing. If we could keep that, that authentic look, which I'm sure you're more than
Yeah, absolutely.
more than willing to, to
Yeah, yeah.
keep that authentic look. It really does help the elevations.
And sometimes there's certain window configurations at the entry and in certain positions where they do get a little bit more adornment, you know, with
Sure,
headers.
sure.
And as you work around to the back, sometimes those get simplified. But yeah, I think we're very intent on making sure that we don't lose. I think that's our specialty, is we don't get lost in the translation from drawings to execution.
Sure, sure.
So.
I understand. I have one more question. Sorry. So the entire neighborhood has this English arts and crafts style. How does that work with the precedent of this area?
There's a long-standing tradition of English immigrants and you know, people coming from other parts of Europe and places where English arts and crafts has existed around the world. And a lot of that is even in the United States. And so we think that there's a wonderful history of English architecture that's kind of been brought with a lot of the early settlers. And there's also sometimes the appropriateness of architecture that sometimes, you know, lends itself to building upon something that might just have an inkling of a tradition here, where you can kind of build upon that and really bring it to a new level and to the forefront. So we think that the climates are not that different. We have a lot of dry climate, so you don't have a lot of deep overhangs and big, you know, deep eaves where you need to, like you do in the South and other locations. But we think that lots of windows and ganged up windows bring a lot of sunlight in, which is always important in climates like this. But, you know, there's examples of arts and crafts architecture here, or English architecture especially here in Utah, and we think it's really appropriate. It's also a very, more recently it's become English modern has become a very popular style for a lot of custom residential work that we do, as you saw in some of those earlier images. And it's starting to build momentum here in Utah and in this part of the state. So we think it's really a nice way to build upon some of the historical traditions here and maybe shed some new light and bring it to a new level. And we also think that, I mean, part of the reasoning, you know, behind our design is not just the architecture, but also the landscape and some of the outdoor spaces. So when you see some of the landscape plan images, you'll see how that really is worked into, you know, the buildings and the architecture as well.
Yeah. No, I think your urban design aspect of it is great. And like I said, I think your sketches are great.
Thank you. This is just
So I'm going to interrupt because I really love what you're showing, but I do think we need more stone. That's just my opinion. In some way, I've looked at all your photos. I zoomed in at the actual buildings you've constructed, or you're modeling this after, and most of them, the chimneys or some elements do have brick or stone, and so I would like to see that feature. I do like the traditional look and thing. I do think sprucing it up a little bit more to include some of that is something that I will be looking for as we look to the future of that.
And that lends itself to, you know, those details really shining. 'Cause, you know, almost all your images have brick that's painted white.
Yeah.
But you can still see the brick details, you know, through the paint.
The texture, right?
You know, the texture of the
Exactly.
Right, you
headers,
do get a
the-
nice texture in
You
it.
know, yeah.
So I do think some elements of that will need to be added, but I do, overall, I think the product seems to flow well.
Yeah.
I still would like to know what we're gonna do about the interior courtyard thing, before we, it's kinda hard because we're just talking general, right?
Yeah, right.
I wouldn't be comfortable doing a subdivision approval right now without having an idea of who owns what, because that's typically what we review and discuss.
Yeah.
But for me, I think the product lends itself to, you've done some good thing. I for one love the word motor
court?
shared motor court instead of driveway. I mean,
Right,
come
right.
on, you deserve credit for that, right?
So, as the commission knows, it's not uncommon for us to have essentially a partial approval with a condition that revised elevations are brought back to the planning commission for a final review. We could
And
certainly
I'm
do
good with that on the elevations, that's why I was trying to bring that up. I still have a lot of questions just on who owns what, which to me is the subdivision side. And so I'll be honest, I'm happy, but I'm a little uncomfortable approving at this stage right now. Again, that's just me.
Okay.
But I do think what you're presenting is something that I think will be fun for Harriman to have a first of. The only thing I would caution you on, and I want you to drive out to Harriman and drive up 126th south. There's a bunch of white structures with red and green roofs on the right side as you come up over the hill. That's why I actually joined to be the planning commission, is to avoid those. And so the reason why I use that as an example is it had a lot of white stucco. And I think we need to be careful because you're going to have I know your renderings look awesome, and it's gonna, again, I'm using my engineering background, renderings are awesome, but it takes about 30 years for trees to look like that and hedges to look like that in Utah. Other places, I get that you'll have that natural hedge pretty quickly.
Right.
We need to make sure it doesn't look like big, blocky, white stucco. So we need to do some elements to add that in and spruce it up on day one.
Yeah, you might want to show also your control joints in your stucco, because that's something that's really needed out here, and that can really make or break, your stucco application.
Yeah, and that's something that we work with a lot, in different parts of the country, where some communities actually prohibit control joints because they don't want that look. There's obviously a certain type of stucco application you have to use to allow that, sometimes with some sort of elastomeric coating or something to keep, control that cracking. But yeah, we are, there's obviously warranties and, that have to be followed on some of those materials that have control joints, but we typically try to minimize those or avoid them altogether. But of course, we don't want to, in our own best interest, not build something that's going to be failing. So.
Oh, of course. But it does make a big difference of where those control joints, especially on your rear elevations, where you have a single plane. Control joints every 20 feet are pretty much what's required per standard. And so just kind of giving that a forethought, how that interacts with your windows, because your windows don't really align, on those rear elevations. They're kind of offset and kind of stuff. So it makes it a little difficult, as you kind of go through to align those with edges of windows or,
I think you're pretty close. I do agree with Adam in the sense of understanding the separation between the units and the common areas and where or how that's going to be defined. I think that needs to be clarified a little bit.
Okay.
I think overall your product it's a wonderful product. I think it'll do well out here. There's, I think, probably some differing opinions, but I think overall it's a very, very good product and it'll do well out here. And so, but if we could probably get that, at least the one area clarified, and then it sounds like there's not a lot more on there.
Jared, I did have one. How big are your garages?
The garages are 20 by 20, in some cases 20 by 23.
Okay, and where are all the garbage cans stored?
We are going to design, as we develop our floor plans, interior storage of the garbage cans.
Okay.
We also have some outdoor spaces between buildings where we're thinking of also designing some enclosures where you can store the cans.
That would be great to bring that in,
I
too.
would like to actually see that. On this tight of density units, we typically have required it even shown inside the garages, because sometimes there is a lot of staircases in the garage, and we want to ensure that it really is a two-car garage that functions, not a one-car and a garbage can holder.
Yeah, we had that come by once, so.
Yeah.
I'm just being consistent.
Yeah. So we understand. So you prefer that they are inside, they're inside the garage, or just that there's room for them?
I prefer that there is a thought-out location for those, so they're not just thrown about. So that, as well as the one thing I didn't see a ton of, where do I go, if my daughter buys this, where do I go park to see her? I don't see a lot of that. That's the one question.
Guest parking?
Yes.
Right, which
you look like you've optimized every square foot for buildings and beautification. I totally get that.
Yeah.
But I know we watched a training today about the evils of parking and all of that, but I still think we have to be realistic that we have to park somewhere, right? Visitors have to park somewhere.
Correct.
And if you're designing a 23-foot deep garage, I know that Daryl's truck definitely won't fit inside that garage. And I know that Chris's might fit, and I think my
I got the
Suburban
short
would
bed,
fit.
so mine will fit
My
barely.
Suburban would fit if I go on an angle. So I'm just saying we need to be realistic, and I actually would like you to show what kind of vehicles you think would actually be in, with the way that there is no parking outside of the home. I think we need to see a little more.
Is there on-street parking?
Is guest parking along
There
the
is.
2 main streets?
Yeah, we
Is
have,
that the one area that I can see?
yeah, let me see if.
Parallel, I kind of saw it in the
Yeah, that's what it looks
Yeah,
like,
we
is
have
you may
on-
have some parallel parking.
Our roads will allow for parking on both sides of the street
Okay,
with our street section. And then we also have, on those motor courts, there's room for one additional off-street parking space for each unit on those motor courts on the edges. So the beauty of those motor courts is, that's why it's called a court, because it's kind of a defined space that can be used for multiple things, but obviously pulling into your garage. But there's also spaces on the edges to get at least one car off to the side, up towards the edges of the property there, to get one additional car outside of the garage at each of those units there.
so I'm gonna tell you, my parents live in probably a, not similar, but townhome community similar to the feel of this a little bit. And they have quite a bit of parking still, and holidays, everything else, it goes out onto main streets. So my guess is you will have individuals at certain times of the year end up in the commercial parking next door. And so, yeah, if we could just get a rough idea of the total number of stalls next time, you might already have that.
Yeah, we have, obviously with the 2-car garages for every unit, we have 12 driveway spaces, as I just mentioned, which is, 1 per unit on those edges. And then we estimate about 50 on-street spaces. We think we can get at least 50 on-street spaces
Okay.
for guest parking, overflow parking. And then we would have to probably avoid, either have an agreement with our neighbor or just in CCRs, discourage anybody from using those neighboring parking lots if it's not wanted.
Could you
probably a
show
good
those? I would actually like to see those parking stalls throughout,
Shown?
just so we can see
Okay.
where you're counting.
Yeah, I do
as
have
parking.
a plan, not with me today, but we can send that to you.
I've been in a townhome like this, and I did what Chris did when I went to see my niece and had to park out in the main street and walk in, dropped everybody off, and then went and moved my car.
Yeah.
So I just think we need to be careful of that. I actually like the idea of on-street parking as long as it's managed well, and it does seem like you don't have a ton of driveways going. Sorry about that.
You mean the number of driveways impede on-street parking?
Yes.
Yeah, so that was one of our strategies, was to reduce those curb cuts, but yeah, so we can do a count that really shows the proximity of on-street parking spaces to each unit.
I have one more question. The southwest corner, you have a tiny little building there.
Yes,
What exactly is that?
Single-family home.
that's a tower, that's a single-family home tower house.
So it's basically all parking on the first floor.
Yeah, so it's a
And then
garage on the
you've
ground
got-
floor. You can see on the front, there's a space for kind of an entry foyer and stair and a front porch
Okay.
that allows you to get up. But we do have a few spots here in the corners that are
A little funky.
either carriage houses or tower houses, which are actually really cool. Obviously, it provides a little bit of variety here for users and types of buyers. And then, of course, the one in the northwest corner is a little bit bigger, where you actually can get a bedroom and bathroom down. And the one on the northeast corner, you can actually get a living space down on the ground level. So there's just a variety of, smaller lot units that create interest. In fact, that one in the northwest corner could be a really interesting terminus to that entry road at the end of that street with a really cool, tower house back there.
Yeah.
So we really intend to capitalize off of those opportunities instead of those being an afterthought and stuck in the corner as something undesirable. Those could actually be the coolest units here.
All right. Is there any more of your presentation that we missed?
I can just breeze through the landscape.
Sure.
If that's something you want to see, I can do that quickly.
I just felt like I asked a question which started a sort of
Yeah, yeah.
spiraled into a couple
Yeah.
more.
This is just the overall landscape plan showing street trees and the green down at the south end. Our landscape design, it's so integral to each of the buildings and the outdoor spaces connected with those that we have a matrix of plantings that are to be used for each of these different yard types. And a little bit closer in, you can see our landscape plan that identifies different yard types that would have different types of plantings. So as I mentioned before, hedges and hedged-in lawns and gardens are really key to kind of this British arts and crafts aesthetic, which really goes beyond the architecture and spreads out to the public realm. But you can see on that middle unit there, in the middle, you know, that would have a certain planting type that is keyed back to that matrix that has planting species and certain structural elements that help define those spaces. And here are some close-ups of some of those spaces where you can see the twin homes, for instance. You can see here, this is where so there's a hedged-in yard all the way around that encloses a private yard that gives a little bit of definition, but it's a low hedge, but it defines it. And then you have a walkway that leads up to that arched opening, and then you have a side porch here that really allows you to extend that living room space and then all the way out into that yard. So the landscape becomes really integral with helping define some of those outdoor spaces. And so there's different versions of that for different units. On the triple townhouse in the center, where you have a recess, we've created a garden court where, again, you have hedges that help define. There are some bollards at the entry that lead inwards, so you have kind of a semi-private outdoor landscape space. The detached units will have more of a conventional landscaping, but we really did try and take advantage of the compactness of this site and with the units of minimizing, you know, leftover and wasted green space and landscapes. We really do want to utilize every inch with some sort of purpose, and some of them are lawns that are defined by hedges, and others are side courts where they might be more hardscape and terraced instead of green and sod. So we're trying to minimize sod and really focus more on usable outdoor spaces that help extend your indoor living spaces. And then this is just a close-up of that green where we're leaving the center open. We do have some underground drainage, but on the two flanking ends, you have a little bit of terrace surface where you can have a sitting area and some certain activities. And on the left-hand side, we have a pair of pavilions that kind of anchor that end where you have a little bit of shade and some enclosure for some potential lawn games that could be played out here. But the idea is to leave this as a multi-purpose open lawn that can be used for community gatherings, maybe a movie, you know, on the lawn where you put up a screen, or gatherings and things like that. We didn't want to over-program it with too many spaces that limit the use. And then, of course, you can see on the edges all those hedged-in, you know, lawns and forecourts that really help start to give you that semi-private edge to that green space.
And you did say these will have CCRs and HOA.
Yes.
Yep.
Right. And then there's a few, just to kind of give you a little view of what those structures will be like. Those little pavilions are just simple shade structures with some wood brackets. And then at the other end of that green, we are anchoring the two corners with mail kiosks that would kind of double as directional signage for some of the addresses on the green for emergency response, and then also a few locations where people can come to get their mail without having to walk too far. And you can see those on this site plan here where we have some mail kiosks just kind of spread out a little bit. So they provide kind of a little iconic, civic structure that is unique, but also has a use and a purpose where people can walk, to gang the mailboxes together. You don't have to walk too far, but it does allow you to get out and interact with your neighbors. And in some cases, you can even drive by and pick it up, like I do in my neighborhood. But I don't know if it's worth talking a little bit more about the space in between the buildings, but we do, it's very clear. I think even in our civil drawings, we actually jog the lot line, like that, to where you actually do have very easily defined spaces associated with the units. But there are other strategies that we might employ with easements to where even if the property line is right down the middle, in the CCRs and in other regulatory documents, we'll be assigning easements to units to use those side yard spaces. Worst case scenario, we don't have any spaces utilizing that. It's just a common space or just kind of a 5-yard sliver, and that's perfectly fine with townhouses. We're just looking for an additional benefit that we can give to these units by providing some side yard private space. So I think there's a few different options we can explore there, and we're continuing that research to figure out the best solution.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Not for me. I do have to say that I appreciate all my fellow commissioners' comments and insights, of which I agree with most of them. But I just want to say that as far as your site plan goes, the overall generic layout, I applaud you for that. It looks sharp. I think it's exactly what Harriman needs. It's something desirable and should stay nice for years to come.
Thank you.
All right, I'll let you have a seat.
All right, thank you.
Andy.
This is the time, right? All right. Getting prompted here. All right. With that discussion, I appreciate that. And again, I echo everything that's been said today as well. Very nice product. So at this time, I'd like to make a motion to suspend the discussion of item 3.4, the Camden Commons Site Plan, and then pending upon completion of the public hearing and decision for item 3.3, then we may have the opportunity to come back to that. But right now, that's my motion.
I'll second it.
Motion made by Andy, second by Forrest. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, guys. Now we'll go to item 3.3. We'll turn it over to city staff, and this is also on for a public hearing.
Yes, and we will, Destiny, if you'll bring up that presentation. And I believe the project engineer, Sitar Tabriz with Ward Engineering, is here tonight, and he'll also be here to answer any of your technical questions on the engineering as well as our engineering staff. But I did want to use this presentation to focus on a couple of the topics that you've been talking about already. Obviously, we're familiar with the site where it's located. It's accessed through some private roads that are already currently existing, Springbuck Drive. We, of course, are reviewing the engineering standards and the zoning ordinance. As a planned development, there's a number of things that are being established with this approval as anticipated by the city code. If you look at the like the setbacks and a lot of the lot dimensions, it's all to be determined as part of the planned development approval. As you know, the request is for up to 33 residential lots. We've been talking about the mixture of the property. It's part of this larger PUD. In my staff report, I mentioned some of the commissioners are recalling that a few years ago, we approved what we thought was the final subdivision plat in this neighborhood. This property is, as I described in the staff report, was intended to be at one time a potential church site. It's owned by the LDS Church. They are now surplusing the property. So this is what's bringing this again, piece back for a review as part of the planned development. We looked at a number of issues. One of the first things that everybody became aware of is that this property is already encumbered by the location of some utility lines that pass through the property. And so that began to dictate where some of these roads are located. The north and south roads meet our city's standards. They're full width, 53-foot wide roads. But the north road is a little bit narrower cross-section because of that private lane from Springbok Drive that comes into the site. We previously talked about that. This is something that the engineering department has been talking about with the city council as well, understanding that there's a limited cross-section available to us. And so this group is just basically proposing to extend that same cross-section onto their site. On the proposed plat, you can see these property lines that are jogging between the lots, the properties. And there's another image that will show that in greater detail. I apologize. This is also identifying the reduced width on that north road. And then, of course, there is that easement, that secondary access through the commercial property. That easement has been in place. It's in favor of this property. We've always intended that there would be a secondary access at this site. We also have had UFA review this, and this has met their requirements for emergency response. We also mentioned in the staff report that the current zoning condition associated with the property does identify a density range of 7 units per acre as a minimum. And then in the table that was adopted and is attached to the ordinance, we included this in your packet, it can go up to 8 units per acre at this location. We brought the applicant to a work session in September, and that was one of the key things that we wanted to make the commission aware of. And I know not all the commissioners were there to participate in that work session, nor was it a binding, there was no motion, there was no discussion as far as, what the commission's position was on that request. But we wanted to let at least the commission know that that's where this applicant was going, is they wanted to try and go for the 8 units per acre as per the plan development and the ordinance that's attached to the property. And there's that highlighted section of the 7 units, and then the 8 units is down in the table. So again, all the setbacks are being established as part of this plan development, lot widths, and this is that detail that is showing the jogging property line. Now, in other municipalities that I've worked for, I have done some zero lot line projects, but I'm not the building official. And admittedly, I'm not sure exactly what is the code requirement that allows for a zero lot line residential project. I just know it's been done. Our building official hasn't really had a lot of experience with that, and they asked the question, like, how is this done? How do we design a zero lot line building that meets all of the necessary codes? So this is an option. This is what is being shown in your packet. But an equally valid option that is more typical, as Jason, the applicant, had mentioned, is just simply bisect that open space with a perpendicular property line. They're happy to accept either one. In the recommended conditions of approval, we've just asked the Planning Commission to defer that item to staff with the understanding that we're simply going to follow what does city code or building code allow. I do believe, and we've talked about this before on some other projects in the city, the idea of trying to use open space in a positive way, where you're shaping the outdoor space just as much as you shape your dining room. You think about the work that you do in creating a space that you use in a purposeful manner versus what's just simply left over. And that's what this developer, as you've heard already, is trying to address is, let's use that, let's shape it, let's make it an outdoor room. And that's why we have this kind of this complexity, but it seems to achieve a larger value that is welcomed in this community, in this location. So again, staff is recommending, if you're comfortable, we would simply defer that final property line location to be compliant with whatever code is going to govern that issue It's not uncommon to have a preliminary plat that shows a certain lot configuration, and then the final plat being a little bit different. We're not changing the number of lots. We're showing 33 potentially here. If we were to go to 34, that we would exceed the preliminary approval, right? We would have to come back to the planning commission and have you make a decision on that, just hypothetically. And this is not uncommon. It's not uncommon for somebody to say, we want to have 100 lots approved. The final plat turns out to be 98. And we don't bring that back to you because it's less than what you had authorized. And a lot of times those changes are happening because of an engineering issue, or they had to accommodate a drainage pond or something like that. So that kind of fine-grained detail between a preliminary plat approval and a final is not unusual. And there's those private garden areas that Jason had highlighted for you previously. So again, as typical, you always have the opportunity to approve the application with staff recommendations, the conditions that are listed in your staff report. You can continue that request for a future meeting. Obviously, we'd like you to specify what exactly you'd like to see in the next meeting. We've also talked about how you can approve it with additional or alternate conditions. If you'd like to see a portion of the project come back for final review in a subsequent meeting, so you have a motion to approve, but you still want to see maybe some element back to you in a future meeting, that would certainly be appropriate as well. We've done that on other projects. So that's our list of recommendations. I don't know if you have any questions for me at this time.
Remind me,
Please.
how many units do you need a second entry? How many units before they need a second?
It's 30.
It's
So
30.
once you cross 30, the second entrance is required. Again, it's there. It meets the UFA requirements. We've had a number of meetings with the fire department.
Where
on
is
that.
the second entrance then?
It is through the commercial property to the east.
Okay, so there will be a second one.
Yes.
Is
We
it's
go back
always
to
going to
that
be
site plan.
available?
Is it a gate or is it a?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering, because I just.
Right here,
didn't
this
see it.
lower red, that will be improved and meet the access
Will it have a
requirements for the
gate
site.
arm though?
No, because the fire department does not want a gate. They want to make sure it's open.
Wow.
Sense.
Yeah.
I don't know if it makes sense for the
So
development.
is there
but it makes sense
agreements
for
in
the fire.
place with the owner
Yes,
to the
it's
east?
already, it was, when this parcel was created, that easement was already in favor of this property. This has always been intended to be a secondary access.
In theory, the entire thing can drain through that commercial pat.
Well,
I mean, that's
if
what
you
most people will probably do, right?
could, but obviously over 30, you've got to have the two access points, right?
No, but I'm more just talking.
Now
I'm
we're
just
just thinking about traffic flow.
I'm just saying, honestly, unless you're going to the Smith's Marketplace, this is your fastest way to Mountain View corridor.
Yes, but it's going to be designed in such a way that visually it's almost like you might be a little bit discouraged. It's not going to be so visible.
But if you live there, you're gonna know the.
Possibly.
I agree, it won't be
There
visible,
are
but you're
visual,
gonna.
we've talked about this. There are visual cues that are going to be set up so that, yes, it's available, but I know in my neighborhood, I have multiple ways out. And sometimes you just choose what just feels most comfortable. It might not even be the shortest route, but through hierarchy, through street hierarchy, oftentimes we just kind of follow those cues. Sometimes we tend to drive on the larger roads versus the smaller roads, because that's more how we typically think about our selection in how do we move through a neighborhood.
We don't all think like that.
I was just, whatever. I was
all I
just
can
curious
say
if
is
we
that-
could call it a one-way street. Make it a one-way street. I'm not saying it's a wrong decision.
Yeah.
But they'd have to be able to exit out of it.
But
is the
what I'm
problem.
saying, in an emergency, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Yeah.
Again, we've reviewed this with UFA, and they have.
I think you can do things that'll discourage its use, you know.
Having a bunch of commercial vehicles parked in front of the commercial
That-
entity later on.
Yeah, texture, I mean, there's lots
Well,
of
if you
ways.
look, there are parking stalls for the commercial as you're going past.
Yeah,
all
my
that.
other fear is that's going to be a residential parking area now.
It will.
Yeah.
Maybe that's okay at late hours.
I guess it depends on what it is.
Weekends.
Someone else thinks it's an issue. I know that's what.
I suppose it could be posted, emergency use only. I said it could certainly be posted for emergency use only.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to dissuade residents living there.
But I think that
It dissuade me.
it would dissuade, that would dissuade me. You're law abiding.
My 16-year-old boy, I don't know.
Mr. Chair.
Rule follower.
I forgot to mention, and Chase whispered in my ear just as I came up, as you moved forward to the public hearing process and also your discussion of this particular application request, the subdivision, be sure to limit your comments to the subdivision relative portions only.
Correct.
And then recommence your discussion on the site plan and make your recommendation on that. So try and keep your conversation or your,
Subdivision only.
yeah, separate. And then, as typical, as you know, we typically give the applicant an opportunity to address you before the public hearing and after, but that's up to you as to how you want to move forward.
Question I have for you, Michael.
Sure.
Is do we have, I see that, I believe this shows the parking, is what I'm seeing the little boxes
Yes,
on.
this was one of the plans that they had given us earlier, right, with the on-street parking. And they did provide a parking impact study, which showed that they met our standards and provided, I think, Jason, you said it was 50 guest parking stalls potentially.
92 was needed, 128 is provided.
Yeah, okay.
Page 117 of the packet.
And again, the north-south roads are full width. Those are full 53-foot, which meets our city standards.
Thank you. If the applicants here would like to come back up.
If you want to just go move forward or backward on that. I don't know what you want to look at.
Most probably this site plan is where we'll be. I'm here to answer questions, and of course our job, it's a tight site. As you know, it's interesting and unique site plan, so we've tried to make it as functional as we can. Every space of this development is being utilized, the backyards, we wanted to make sure that they are not on a 3-to-1 slopes, or even they're basically no more than 5% slopes, just to meet the code requirements. The roads are private, and we can, as Jason mentioned, we can park on the south side of the north road, on both sides of the east and west road. The parking study identified 92 parking requirement, and we are at 128, counting the parking we do in the motor courts and on the streets. That's about 3.87 per unit. That's quite a bit of parking, by the way. You know, I just go through what an engineering issues are. The drainage and the grading. That we utilize that green space as our detention area. That's going to be underground storm tech detention. And the site drains to the north and east, and that's where we connect to the city's storm drain system. On the way out on that pole for the flag, we have our LID conditions met, a low impact design for a storm drain. We have additional stormwater underground detentions in that section of the road. Sewer is obviously with South Valley Sewer. It's being reviewed. We have met with them. Should be just fine. Water. We do have a couple of challenges. That East Road, it also is a Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District water line. It's a transmission water line, and we can't get into that easement under no circumstances, except to cross it. We cannot parallel, but cross. We also have a high-pressure gas line in that vicinity, so that East Road kind of functions in multiple ways. And our water line connects at the northeast,
loops around the west loop, west road, down on the south end, and back through that access road that is at the bottom. And we have the right of way and utility easement to go through that parking lot. And we back connect to Anthem Park Boulevard. And we have some issues on how we're going to handle that east road and the roads on the east, the buildings on the east side of the road, and we are working those out with Jonathan, your city engineer. Grading, which kind of goes along the same way as the drainage. You know, we have the east property line. It is under construction right now, and we're going to try to be about 3-4 feet from their parking lot with our backyard elevation, and then 6-foot tall privacy fence. As we go south, there's an existing dentist office, and they haven't given us a lot of room to work with. They only have like a 5-foot park strip. And we will be installing a retaining wall just to keep our backyards functional. You know, we could slope it back to them, but we're not going to do that. We want to keep them not tabletop, but pretty close to that. We talked about parking. You know, the subdivision plat itself, basically it's going to be common areas and fee simple areas. Typically, we also have limited common on it. I don't think we're going to have a limited common in this project. So basically, the backyards of the residents and the front yards of the residents are going to be their fee simple area, and the private roads and the park, the green space, and alleys going to be the common areas. I'm here to answer any questions.
What I'm going to do is if you want to have a seat, and then I'll open the public hearing and close, and then I'll let you come back up and we'll ask questions at that point. At this time, we'll open the public hearing for item 3.3. And Wendy, did we get any emails on this item? Okay. And we will close the public hearing at this time, and then we'll turn to the Planning Commission, and if there's any questions for the applicant, we'll invite him back up.
I do have a question, so if you come up. So that east property line.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, the east property line, you said that your development will be lower than the commercial, right? And
No,
so then,
we are higher.
Oh, you're higher.
We are higher.
Okay. Okay. And then the required wall or fence will be
Only
on
some
top of
area-
the,
Yeah, only as we get close to the north area, because that road is obviously lower elevation. We don't want to have a weird looking fence. And so we're going to have a little bit of a retaining wall on the north side just to keep the fence line pretty good looking.
Okay.
And also on the south side, we get close to the access road, and through that dentist office, we're going to have not big, like 3-foot retaining wall, more of a landscape wall.
Right. Same question as Commissioner Powell's. That east line, we're higher than the east property. So there's a retaining wall and then a fence atop of that. Is that what it's going to look like?
Yeah, okay. Actually, we are working with them. We are cooperating with the east property line. We had a Zoom meeting last week, and they commissioned me to kind of do a grading plan for both. So just kind of imagining, their parking lot is about 17 feet from our east fence line. And there's actually, right now, there's a big hole there. Apparently there was a pond, so the question was who fills that hole. So from the curb line on the west side of their parking lot to our fence, which is about 17 feet or so, we're going to be no more than 3-to-1 slope. So in 17 feet, that's about 4 or 5 feet. So we're climbing up. And there's a lot of reason for that. We want to keep our backyards pretty flat because the motor courts, they have to slope up, and we have to build the building code requirements for the drainage away from the houses, 5% on the grass. So we kind of considered all that into account. So we feel what we've come up with is the best for the residents. You know, it gives them the utmost privacy. And with the 6-foot fence, I don't think we're going to have any issues with that next door.
Right, so the further south you come, that wall diminishes because the grades on your neighbor's property and your property kind of match. They start to catch, right?
Exactly. The south and north property line, we match them right on the bottom of their fence line.
Right.
In fact, we're going to save those fences on the north, west, and east. On the west property line, we are also matching, except in one little bit of an area on the northwest that we put in like a 1-foot boulders or, you know, small retaining wall.
Yeah.
We just want to be able to utilize the full 10-foot. Otherwise, we could do, you know, like little slopes and things like that.
Just one other question. That east road, you mentioned that there's an existing water line in there. Does it follow that road, the same alignment as that road, so basically north-south?
Yeah, exactly. We basically followed it. You know, there's
Right.
a 30-foot easement, 20-foot easement for pressure gas, 30-foot for the Jordan Valley water line, side by side, make up the 50 feet, and we kind of put our 53 feet to fit on that. Yes.
Daryl, I think there actually, you can kind of see where the drive approach label is on the bottom one. You can see the dash lines, the utility lines going right there. You see the lines as they go in towards the school?
Oh, yeah, yeah, okay.
Pretty sure that looks like where they are, because it
One of the
continues up
easements,
to
yeah.
the north as well.
Yeah, probably one of those two.
On
extends
the
through
south
the north.
access,
I think that's the utility.
are you having
Well,
the
he says he's
wall
got a
on the north side of the south access?
Just partially, yes, on the north side. The retaining wall kind of turns around, but we've allowed like 5 foot from the asphalt. So there's going to be a little landscaping between the road and the wall.
And then, and this is just relevant because the last 2 days on snow removal, where are you pushing the snow?
I'm sorry?
On snow removal, where are you pushing the snow?
Well, we have a little bit of that, the southeast access, the south access. We have a little bit of an open space there. That's going to be, you know, whether you push it or haul it, it's going to be hauled over there if needed.
So below the south access in that little area?
Exactly, right, on the south side
Okay.
of the south access. Also, the green area, you know, that we have, it's a place for snow storage.
What does the section on the North Road look like with a 44.5-foot right-of-way?
Yeah.
Does it have,
Well, basically, it is, the south side of it is a normal 5-foot, 5-foot road. And we've just reduced the face-to-face of the north access to 26 feet, right? So it's 27 feet from back of curb to back of curb. The idea was, you know, let's not park on both sides of it. And we have some limitation. We wanted to create some space on the north side of the North Road, like a 7-foot strip of landscaping for trees and shrubbery, just to give a nice feel for as you come into the project. So have trees on both sides, and it kind of looks nice and symmetrical.
sure. So traffic running in and out on that North Road with street parking on the south side of it, it's doable, but it'll feel kind of tight.
It's yeah, it is. It's, you know, for that reason, we've also reduced the speed to 12.5 in this project. So that's what it's going to be posted.
12.5.
12.5. That's awesome. It's unique.
Well, thank you. That's all the questions I had.
Any other questions? I think you can have a seat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Planning Commission, if additional discussion, or if we're at a point where we would like to make a motion, if we are looking at continuing this, let's be very clear on what we need to come back, or if we are looking to approve but needing them to bring some things back, let's also be very clear on that.
I just was gonna ask something to Michael. What is the total units
33, that's what's being
for the
requested.
entire development?
Yep, 33 units.
No, I'm talking, when you add it in, does it take us out of the entire?
Oh, we're talking about Anthem.
No, in
About the
fact,
entire Anthem number is
right,
what I'm asking.
no, we're underneath because you probably familiar with the Aspera project?
Yeah.
And it ended up having fewer units than what we had approved.
Okay. So
The other thing that's really interesting about the record is it was very clear that the institutional uses did not have, there was not units awarded or transferred from.
When they
It was
lost the land, they
just
lost the
held
land.
like separate.
That's perfect.
But now that we're changing the use, that's why, and I talked with Chase about this, I said, well, what governs here? And ultimately, we said the zoning condition, the ordinance that was approved by the city council and is recorded against the property, that was the density range that we were looking at.
Perfect.
That governed the site.
Thank you. That was my
Yeah.
question. So for me, I did want to see the side yards, but I don't know that that's a deal stopper, to be honest. I just was curious.
Yeah, I was gonna say, could I go to that? I don't have an issue with these recommendations either. I'm good as is.
Then I think we'll look for a motion to be made.
No other comment?
Go for it.
Whoever wants to.
Let's get home. No, I'm kidding. This is great. No, and I appreciate it. So excited for this. So I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve item 3.3, the request to approve the preliminary plat of the Camden Commons subdivision with staff's 6 recommendations as noted.
Motion made by Andy, and Andrea seconded that.
Good job.
And we'll call for a vote. Heather?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Forrest?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
And Daryl?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Then we'll move on to item 3.4. And as we've already discussed it, if there's no further discussion, we'll look for a motion at this time.
So for me, I'd like to see the structure come back and the garbage can layout and some of those simple things. I don't know that that's a stopper, but I think I would like to see it come back, but I'm open to hear anybody else's opinion on it.
You want to go to the,
I'm just bringing up the conditions.
I was gonna say
for-
that last slide that has the
Yeah.
conditions, maybe we add to it.
Maybe I didn't put, oh, there it is, yeah.
And that item 5 is the one that you were talking about before, Michael, where if there's any significant
Yes.
changes to the
Yep.
elevation, that's where that would be.
Oh,
Required to come
I
back
did
to us.
mean to ask one question.
Yes.
So there north, there's I think is it a fence? Is that one, is it,
Could be commercial.
It's an existing fence from the.
is it
apartment
vinyl
project.
or is it, I can't remember if it's stone, okay, yeah. So the only question I have with that, because I'm pretty positive that's what I'm thinking of. So the middle schoolers have peeled away panels of that fence to get through, to walk through that to the school. So I'm almost positive that's the fence
Yeah,
that
and
we
they're
need to
not,
figure out.
they're not proposing changes to that north fence, right?
They have repaired it since. Okay, I just want to make sure that's taken care of before, obviously, your development's put in
The
place.
other interesting thing is the existing pediatric orthodontic group that I think is there. For whatever reason, we didn't require the masonry wall between our residential and commercial use. So you saw that we added that as a condition here. We've already provided contact information with the abutting development that's underway. And as you've heard, they've already been in contact because they have the same desire of tying in with the masonry fence line along
Is
that
all
east
that
side.
commercial already spoken for on the?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
so we're done. And the only reason why I ask is I know what'll happen if all of a sudden a gas station is proposed right
No,
there.
and again, they have the contact information for those other development groups.
That
to
sounds
coordinate
wonderful.
that. Yep.
I think that the reason why we didn't with that fence was because we wanted the kids to be able to like get through to the school, right?
They'll have to walk around now, or else they'll be walking through another neighborhood, and maybe that's okay. I don't
No,
know.
I actually think the one we required is the new plaza area, the new office complex. We just messed up and didn't require it on the
Right.
Payne Orthodontics
I
one.
think that's what happened. It was just an oversight.
Right, the first one.
That was when we
Because
started
typically
the
we put
fence
that on
problem
the
and concerns.
commercial piece, right?
Yeah, it
So-
would always be on the commercial side.
So we
missed-
gave them the bad news and we said, it's yours. So, yeah.
All right. Okay, I don't have anything else. Item 3.4. Adam had a couple thoughts, but
I'll just say my motion and then you guys can
There you
say
go.
yes or no. I'd like to approve item 3.4 with staff's 5 recommendations with a number 6 to have the architecture come back with more stone, brick or stone on the actual elevations for the buildings, as well as to delineate where amenities such as garbage cans and things like that will be shown. Before, I don't know, I never know when to put that as a stipulation. When, Mike, when would be the best time to not get too far down the road, but still get down the road a little bit?
Yeah, you could say just before building permit issuance, or we could do it before.
How about before final plat? Is
yeah.
that okay?
Can we specify brick over stone?
I don't care.
I'm okay with leaving
I
that
wanna
up to
leave it
them.
open,
I'm
but-
pretty sure they'll go with brick.
But I would like to see it in a lot
Stone just
more-
doesn't match the style, so.
I think
If we
they'll
just
stay
specify
with the
Leave it up to
style.
them.
Don't worry about that.
This is where the engineer and architect discussion gets.
So
Whatever, man.
masonry, just in general masonry. You want to see
yeah,
them
you could say
respond to
masonry.
your
Masonry,
comments tonight?
Yep.
Okay.
Before final plat is what I'm thinking of? Before
Okay.
building permit, that's fine.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, motion made by Adam, a second by Forrest, and we'll call for a vote. Heather?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Forrest?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
And Daryl?
Yes.
Thank you so much for your time, guys. I'm excited to see the finished product.
Thank you.
Item 4, chair and commission comments, if any.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Item 5, future meetings. Wednesday, December 29th, 2021, joint city council planning commission meeting has been canceled. Thursday, January 6th is 2022 planning commission meeting. And then Wednesday, January 12th, and that is a typo. That's not 2021, it'll be 2022 city council meeting. And we'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Well done. Sorry, I think it'll be a neat product, though.
It will be cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I like a little diversification of different styles.
Yeah.